Facts and Fictions, the Cozy Book Club podcast where we talk about the books we're reading, the thoughts they evoke, and the random stories that come up along the way. My name's Morgan.
My name's Desiree, and this past week we read The Girls by Emma Cline, a story that follows a 14-year-old girl and her entanglement with a cult. Very interesting.
It was. The entire time I was reading, I just couldn't stop thinking how young 14 is for everything she's experiencing.
Definitely. I found myself cringing a lot during the stories that were told.
It's hard for me to have that young of a protagonist now that, I'm over twice her age and...
Oh my gosh, that.
Oh, no. Yeah, I just wanted to scoop her up and be like, why are you making these decisions? Then I have to remind myself, it's because she's a 14-year-old girl. That's why she's making these decisions.
Yes, and I feel like the fact that she was 14 years old, I kept that in the back of my mind, and it made all of the encounters, especially with the men in the book, so triggering and hard to read, honestly.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I kept trying to compare her to who I was at 14. And, at 14, I was a little bit resentful towards the way I was sheltered. And now, I need to call my parents and be like, thank you so much for sheltering me, because I could not have experienced those things if I tried. The tether was tight enough that wasn't going to happen for me at 14.
Yeah. And I think there probably are people who didn't have family dynamic that was as tight as yours. And they could have just disappeared at 14, but that does seem really crazy and unfathomable. But it does happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You hear those stories all the time of the kids, they don't have the parents that they deserve and end up in these bad situations.
In 14, what grade would a 14-year-old be in?
I was a freshman. I turned 14 right before freshman year.
Okay. So yeah, freshman year.
That's just a baby. I was so naive and so
impressionable.
Innocent.
Yeah. And I think wanting the approval of those around you. And I feel like there were multiple times in the book, especially there's one specific scene that I was just reminded of, but the scene where she says that she's seen that movie that the boys.
Oh, yeah.
And then she's embarrassed.
Yeah, she's trying to be cool.
Yeah.
And impress these older boys.
Yeah. They set her up. And I feel like that's such a teenage experience, trying to fit in and trying to feel like you're a part of something and then being embarrassed.
Yeah, I feel like it's this constant cycle of just trying to be good enough for the people around you.
Yes.
And they're doing that same thing. You just don't realize that you think you're the only one feeling those feelings at that age. I did like how they kept cutting back and forth from the storyline with the cult to the storyline with the people from school, with the boys and with Connie. I think it really kept reminding us she is a little girl.
Yes.
When you're hearing about the drama with her high school frenemy Connie, it's that's things I was experiencing, and I think most people can relate to that, and it makes it easier to put yourself in her shoes.
Yes, I completely agree.
At the end of the day, she is just a 14-year-old girl going through these things, these very adult experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like the author Emma really did a great job of continuously reminding us of her age.
That was actually, I think, the thing she did the best throughout the whole story is whenever you got too deep into the storyline of the cult, it's wait, she is just a little girl. She is in trouble with her dad for leaving or whatever. It's she still has these, not great parents, but she's got parents she has to deal with.
Yeah.
The friendships. She's little.
So little and went through so much in a little amount of time.
Yeah.
What did you think about Suzanne, and did you take Suzanne? So Suzanne was one of the other main characters. It was the girl with the long black hair, the pretty girl with the long black hair, and the one who, it seemed to me, kind of multiple times tried to dissuade Evie from getting into the world of the cult.
Yeah, I agree. I think she was there because she had no other options, and she saw that Evie did have a life she could go back to where she would be safe and relatively loved. And Suzanne wanted to protect her, but also selfishly, she liked Evie. And I think she also wanted to spend time with her. And maybe the innocence of Evie was appealing to Suzanne. So I think she had a little bit of a moral dilemma there. At one hand, she wants her to not get entangled, but on the other hand, selfishly, she does want Evie with her.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I think that she battled between those once the entire way. And I am glad at the end that ultimately she kicks her out of the car.
Mhm. And like at the time it's happening, I'm sure it's just like so devastating for Evie. Like I was feeling bad for her, even knowing what was happening. Yeah, I'm feeling bad for Evie. Like, oh, I should like explain, but I think she did the right thing at the last moment for Evie, not the right thing overall. But
Yeah, definitely. Did you know anything with this book? The author says that she took parts of it was inspired by the Manson family, but it's not a Manson family story. But there was, I think, a lot, or to me, it is a Manson family story. I don't think that, to me, it was just so entwined with the reality of that story. I think of it as a Manson family.
I agree. And I wouldn't even know a ton about the Manson family. And from like pretty early on in the story, I'm like, oh, this is like Manson family fanfic.
Yeah.
And
you know what this book kind of reminded me of? A book we've read previously, Ashley Flowers' book.
yes, I was thinking the same thing. We've got the John Bonet fanfic. Now we've got the Manson family fanfic.
Yeah. I don't love this type of book. I don't like it.
I think like in a way it takes some of the creativity out of the storyline. I think she was able to reinsert the creativity by having it from the perspective of the 14-year-old, but I would have liked it to be, for my reading preferences, less aligned.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't have wanted it to be so obvious that like that's where the inspiration was drawn.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm okay with as I'm reading, I find those similarities, but I don't like when it's out there as, this is what this is.
Yeah.
So close.
And you always hear like that saying, like, fact is stranger than fiction. And I feel like that's the case. Like, if you want a story like this, like, listen to like the real podcast about the Manson family, read real stories about them.
Yes.
We don't necessarily need fiction inspired based so closely on things that already happened. That's my 2 cents.
Yes. And we can appreciate, or I think I would assume we can both appreciate the fact that this was told kind of as far as the storyline, it was told as the girl's side of it. It not being a glorification of the horror of the Manson family.
Yeah.
Because I definitely don't think that the story was glorified, which I really appreciated, because this was a terrifying, disgusting situation, the Manson family. So I appreciated that there wasn't parts of it that made it seem enticing or good. The people in it, I felt it was always told from they're getting food out of the dumpster.
Yeah.
It was told in a real gruesome way, I thought.
I agree with that. I think that was something, it seems like she did intentionally, which I think was very thoughtful of her, where it didn't seem like they were having this glamorous life, even though maybe Evie got kind of brainwashed into thinking it was. As the reader, the entire time, like, oh, this is like not a great situation for her to be in. It's not a great situation for any of them to be in. I think a lot of times when you talk about cults, people do love to glamorize them and like make them to be like this like sexy thing when they really were not. So I think Emma did a really good job being like, hey, like, this was not a great situation, as opposed to some other things like media I've consumed about cults in the past, where it just seems so like just glamorous.
Yeah. Do you think that you would, as a person, maybe when you're younger, would be susceptible to a cult?
I am of the belief that everyone could be with like the right cult leader.
Okay.
I don't think I would be susceptible to this kind of cult.
Yeah.
Because like, especially as a teenager, older men grossed me out. Like even now, I think like my husband's 30 and I'm like, oh, he's 30. And I'm like, dude, I'm almost 30. So like that, like older men have never been appealing to me. If we had like a really cool girly pop cult leader who like, I don't know, I could,
Taylor Swift?
I could be susceptible to something like that, but not a traditional cult. I do think I'm of the mindset anyone could fall into a cult. And the people who think they can't are the ones who are most susceptible. That's like my 2 cents.
I feel like I wouldn't. I feel like I wouldn't be susceptible. That maybe I feel like I'm such a. I'm always questioning everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, but if
I feel like we need a cult leader to validate you then. Like somebody like who hasn't answered all of your questions. And be like, wait, no, I'm on your side. Isn't this kind of weird? So you think they're on your side.
okay, well, I know. Stay tuned. I still have many years to live. Hopefully, maybe I'll be in a season 5. Dusty reports a cult. No, I mean, you're probably right, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think either of us will fall into a cult, but I think if somebody wanted to draw us in and they were very intentional,
Yeah.
they could get us. I feel like we'd end up in the same cult though. Like, I don't think we would go to separate cults.
Well, that gives me comfort.
Yeah. That's like, think we have fun with it.
No, gosh.
But at 14, I think I could have been a lot more manipulatable, just not by Russell, because I'd have thought he was dirty and gross.
Speaking of her age, 14 years old, she returned to her parents a couple times throughout the book. What were your thoughts on her relationship with them / her mom specifically?
Her mom made me sad in multiple ways. I felt bad for her mom as like an adult woman navigating what she's navigating, but more so I felt bad for Evie because her mom's not getting it together for her. I think it's one thing if her mom doesn't have kids, that's like what she's feeling is valid, and the way she's behaving with kids is not. I felt for her. I definitely did. Like being left and abandoned, I can't imagine the feeling of that. But I think when you decide to bring a child into this world, those things and those heavy feelings come second. You have to show up for your child in the way they need you. I think her mom was very irresponsible and immature and definitely valued her dating life more than she valued her daughter, which just made me want to cry.
Yes, I completely agree. I felt anger when I was reading a couple of the scenes. Specifically the one where the mom broke it to Edie that her boyfriend would be moving in with them. That was extremely angering to read. And like you said, I think when it was, I feel for her mom. I agree with you that, navigating life as as an adult and being left with a child, I cannot even imagine what a mental toll that would take on you. But when it comes down to it, I mean, you have to stand up and be what your kid needs. And she certainly did not do that. And it ultimately led to Evie having the space to join a cult.
Yeah.
Ultimately, her mom wasn't there for her. She was looking for validation, and her mom wasn't involved enough in her day-to-day in life, and it was just clueless. She was absorbed into this man, and what she wanted their life to be, that Evie was not her priority.
No, not at all.
And I think that is a real, the reality of children who end up in compromising situations. It does come back to how their day-to-day life and their parents not being fully present. And sometimes it's not, their parent is doing all they can and they're, working jobs to make ends meet and bring in the money for the family. But the reality is that's what happens, and kids get into bad situations, and it's just sad.
Her mom had every opportunity to be a good parent because of the privilege she had. She had the family money, and she was just choosing not to be. There's like the stories of like the struggling single moms who like they're absent because they have to be. They have to make money. They have to put food on the table. They have to pay rent. That was not the case here. Her mom was choosing to be absent. I was talking to my friend fairly recently about just like future things, and she doesn't want to have kids. And one of the things she said that I thought was very compelling for her, she's like, I don't want to ever put myself in a position to be a single parent. I could see myself being a happy parent if I stayed married. She came from divorced parents. So just like, of course, everyone goes into a marriage wanting to have, like, to stay together forever, but that's not always the case. And she's like, I never want to be a single mother. It happened by divorce. You could lose your spouse. It's like that. makes a lot of sense, and I feel like a lot of people don't think things like that through, and I feel like that's probably where one of
Mm.
the things Evie's mom never thought about, and I don't even know if she was equipped to be a mom at all, like, even when they were married.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I feel like so many people who shouldn't have kids, and they have kids because that's what you're supposed to do,
Mhm.
and that makes me sad for them and for the kids, mostly for the kids.
Yeah, I think that she definitely was not her mind was not right, and it wasn't where it needed to be, and Evie was the one who suffered, really.
Yeah. No, and it just gave her so much wiggle room to make all these bad decisions. So there's, like, no such thing as a perfect parent, but even a half decent parent, your 14-year-old doesn't fall into a cult.
No. We're not in the game of mom shame, we're really not. I just think that was a big part of the story was
Yeah, the mom's shortcomings,
yeah.
like the dad's too, but that's like a tale as old as time. Like the absentee dad, which sucks, and I feel like that's a topic that's been beaten to
Mhm.
the ends of the earth and back. And a lot of times when you have these absentee dads, at least you have the super mom to make up for it. That's not something that existed in this story. You had the absentee dad and the emotionally absentee mom.
Yes. Shall we talk about Russell, the cult leader, who actually really was not a I mean, he was a cult leader, but he really wasn't a main character.
No, I was surprised he didn't
Yeah.
have more airtime in the
Yeah.
book. Yeah.
Definitely a gross man.
Might have missed how old is he supposed to be? I imagined him as, like, 30, was just, like, in my head.
I also imagined him as 30. I don't think that it was ever specified.
Okay.
But I imagine like a cult leader. I feel like I feel like he has to be I feel like we're on the right track because he has to be young enough to be able to relate and bring in these young girls, but old enough to have gone through the experiences of life and know how to manipulate people so well,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And his sidekick, Mitch, was also very gross.
Yes. I almost felt like maybe I was misinterpreting this. In Mitch's mind, Russell was just, like, a toy to him, Russell and the Colt, whereas, like, just, like, a fun little side hobby.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, that's, like which made him feel even grosser to me.
Mhm.
Like, he wasn't, I don't think, as enthralled by Russell, he just thought it was a fun little plaything.
And access to
Yeah.
what Russell
Yes,
has
to the
put together.
crystals, and
Yeah.
that was it made him feel more sinister to me. Yeah, he was already a sinister character,
Yeah.
like, but trying to, like, think about his motivations, like, I don't know if he's really fallen for all of this. I think he just likes what he can benefit. He's trying to reap the benefits of what Russell had done.
Yeah, definitely.
I had a lot of trouble reading through the story after story of, like, sexual assault is what it was. I know Evie
Mhm.
thought it was consensual, it was not because she's 14 and these are grown men. I I don't know if I could read another book with, like, a child protagonist.
No, I also found that very hard to read if this book doesn't already have, um, a trigger on what is that called?
The trigger
A
warning?
trigger warning
Yeah.
of, sexual assault. It should. Um, it's very it was very hard to read. I mean, it was written so well that it felt
Yeah.
way too real.
I was imagining just, like, a teenage drama, rom-com, coming of age, easygoing, lighthearted thing, just the title, The Girls.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, it's gonna be so cute," but
We'll hopefully have a lighter read for next week because we need it. One thing I feel like the author did really well was capturing the emotion of those um, feelings you have as a teenager. She write she did a very good job with her writing. I found it to be really intricate and
oh, yeah.
well written, um, which makes it easier to read, but, ultimately, I didn't feel like I connected with the book. I came away not feeling and none of the characters were meant to be likable, and I understand that, but I at the end of the book, I honestly, I probably could only name a few of the characters. I don't know. I didn't connect with it.
No, I agree with that. Like, the only connective emotion I felt, I think, was, like, protectiveness. Like, reading about, like, what Evie's going through and trying to imagine, like, the young girls in my life. And it's, oh, like, they're just babies and they're older than Evie. And that yeah, I felt protectiveness. Even she's not a likable character, but she is like a child, and it's like I wish this story, even if she was just like 3 or 4 years older
Yeah.
in the book, I think it would have been an easier read for me. But it was pulling at the heartstrings a little bit, just remembering how young I felt at 14.
Now that I'm thinking about it, what is 14 was 14 an age of girls within the Manson cult? Or because I didn't research the, um, the cult and its members and what that looked like. And this was set in 1969, so I understand that, maybe it was a little easier to go under the radar in general. But imagining, like, a 14-year-old in this day and age just disappearing into a cult.
Yeah, so this article, Diane Lake was just 14 years old when she met mass murderer Charles Manson and fell under his spell to join the family cult. So, yeah.
So potentially.
That was, like, a very strong
Yeah.
inspiration from the
Yeah.
Manson stories even. Here's a quote from her, it's so sad. "I needed love and affection, and I needed family. I needed to feel like I belonged somewhere, and he perceived that from the get-go. He was offering me more than sex. He told me I should forget my parents and give up my inhibitions. He made it clear he wanted me to be part of the group, his group. I felt there's no turning back." Oh my gosh. He is so
It makes me sick. That's her?
oh, she's so little.
Oh my gosh.
So she testified against him when she was 17.
So, maybe it was because Helen
Yeah, how
was the one who
yeah, and she
testified.
said that, yeah, there's maybe a little bit of inspiration and split her into 2 characters,
Yep.
Evie and Helen.
Yep.
Lake said the women who she considered friends decided to stand by Manson during the trial and even after he was convicted.
Many significant events happened in 1969, including Neil Armstrong became the first person to walk on the moon. Woodstock happened. The Stonewall riots, which were for gay rights, happened. The Godfather was published. Sesame Street premiered. Both the internet and glue sticks were invented in 1969.
Gosh.
And the Nixon Doctrine, which stated that the United States expected its Asian allies to take care of their own military defense, was declared, which was huge. 1969 was what a year. Yeah, wow. No wonder. I do feel like 1969 is a year that's very historical.
Yeah.
And obviously the Manson um, murders, the Tate LaBianca murders by the followers of Charles Manson occurs that year. It's kind of crazy to think about that though, because I feel like we feel like we're going through every other day. We have crazy events happening in the year 2024. But then you look back on
Yeah.
a year such as 1969, and they went through a lot too.
No, just a few weeks ago, right after the election, I talked to my grandma about that, about, like, how so much seems to be happening right now, and she made a good point, and she's like, "When I was a girl, we found out everything from the radio, so much was happening, but you can only hear one story at a time. You're not looking at your iPad while watching the news, like, multitasking all of, like, this influx of information." And it's like, I feel like every period for the rest of mankind is gonna be like, "Wow, so much is happening right now in our, like, timeline."
That's
When that's,
true.
like, true of every timeline. Like, my grandma, I can't remember the exact event she was saying, like, things that she didn't find out for 2 or 3 days until after they happened, and I'm like, "That's wild." She's like, "You didn't turn on the radio, you didn't know."
I honestly kind of feel, yeah, envious of that. Because as much as I try to avoid, it's impossible.
It is impossible.
Really impossible. I don't know how many times I have to turn off my push notifications for people or
Mhm.
whatever, but they get to me somehow.
Do you wanna do our fan cast?
Oh yes, let's do Fantas.
And this has actually been somewhat picked up to be produced into something. I was reading
Yeah.
her ex-boyfriend, like, was, like, suing for copyright things, and that's what stalled it.
Emma Cline?
Yeah. But I think he lost because he was saying, like, of her or his intellectual property existed within the book, so, like,
My gosh,
in my head, I'm like, typical man.
tea.
Yeah.
Yeah, also this book, we thought that this book was much more current than it is. It was published, what, 2016?
I think so.
Like 8 years ago. We thought it was fairly new,
Yeah.
so I think we're a little bit late to this one.
Yes, we are.
Fan cast. Evie.
So I know we only did young Evie, but in my head, I started with old Evie. Who I had is Anne Hathaway. So then I was trying to find like a younger version of her. And then I found Mackenzie Foy, who I just like Googled young actresses. And I
Mhm.
was like, she looks close enough. And she played Renesmee in like the Twilight Saga.
Nice. I chose Lily Rose Depp as young Evie.
Like she'd do such a good job playing young.
Yeah.
I don't know how old Mackenzie Foy is because I feel like if they're actually producing it, they have to have an adult actor who can play young.
Yes, I agree.
So I don't know if I don't know.
Speaking of Mackenzie Foy, I actually chose her as Suzanne. Um, so that's interesting.
We did not conspire at all either. I had Zendaya as Suzanne.
I like that.
I love Zendaya.
Ellen, I had Millie Bobby Brown.
I had Elle Fanning, and I know they described her as tan, but I was like,
Mhm.
maybe it's like suntan.
Yeah.
So
I mean, anything's possible.
yeah, anything's possible.
Yeah. Ruth, I had Madeline Klein.
I had Jennifer Goodwin, who I did not realize her age. She's almost 50 when I googled that. I would have thought she was in her like 30s, and I still stand by it. I think she could play young.
Donna, I did Sadie Sink.
I did Bella Thorne.
Russell, I did Aiden Ehrenreich.
I did Kit Harington.
I like that one. Mitchell, I did Michael Weston.
I did Harry Styles.
And then Linda, I did Lily Reinhart.
I did Romy Stride.
I like that.
I feel like we do so good aligning. Like with different picks, but same vibe.
Yeah. I do really like the fan cast because it makes me think about the characters and how I envision them because I do feel like I have a fairly like descriptive like picture of them in my head when I'm reading. Do you feel like you create a
I do. And I was actually gonna say, so we did our fan cast this morning. I was thinking the next book we read, I want to do a few chapters and then start the fan cast.
Okay.
Just that you don't
Yeah.
have to, but that's like something
Yeah.
I want to see if it comes more naturally.
Yeah.
I
You should.
yeah, I think that
Why not?
just compare and contrast and I also think that could help while I'm reading if I have like that very clear face in my mind. We'll try that next time.
Yeah. Um Speaking of like fan cast or just like visualizing characters, um do you ever get upset when you read a book, but then you watch the, series or the movie adaptation of it, and the actor is nothing like what you pictured?
And I'm like, why did you not consult with me?
Yeah.
I obviously had a clearer vision of this than you did.
Yeah.
It's the same thing if I'm reading a book and like they haven't given a physical description for the character, but they're like, she tucks her long blonde hair behind her ear, and I'm like, no, she's got short black hair.
Yeah.
Talking about.
Yes, like, halfway through the book and they start throwing out descriptors, it's like, "No, no, 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 no.
No. I need to get like the white out files in there.
No, that's so right." But yeah, you can't a note to authors, please, descriptors of characters should be within the first 25% of the page or 25% of the book, because after that, where I'm no longer waiting for those, I am creating
Yeah, you're filling
in
the
my head.
blanks.
I didn't like the name Eevee.
Not my cup of tea.
I there's a Pokemon named Eevee, I'm fairly sure, and that's my immediate, like, relation to that name.
Evie was like a very like trendy name in like the baby name world, like 2016. And I feel like that's how Evelyn got so popular. People named their babies Evelyn to call her Evie.
Okay, so actually that's so interesting. So, I wonder, do you feel like these names were true to the 1969
Everything except for
year?
Evie.
Everything but
They
Eevee,
did
okay.
call her Evelyn. That was like
Oh,
her
and then
name.
That's right.
So I think
Okay.
that one that fits.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't.
But Evie felt so current,
Yeah,
like
Evie does.
way too
Modern.
modern. Duh.
Right.
Yeah. Way too modern for the group of
Mm.
um other names. But it was a nickname, but still, to me, it's
Yeah,
too modern.
I agree with
Stuck
that.
out.
The rest of them I think felt pretty, yeah, on the nose. I feel like Mitch is like a perpetual teenage boy name though. Mitchell, Mitch.
Yeah.
It fits technically with the era, but I can't imagine any man named Mitch or Mitchell. That's a boy's name.
So ratings for this book, which as you could tell, this probably wasn't our favorite book we've read. Um, I rated it a 3.
I gave it a 3.5, which
Yeah.
it's one like I always say this though. I'm glad I read it,
Yeah.
like in my repertoire now, but it's also not one I'm necessarily like, excited to recommend. Like if a friend asks me, like, "Oh, have you read any good books recently?" That's probably not going to be at the top of my list.
Yeah. I agree. I feel like it's very rare that I regret reading a book.
Yeah.
Um, so I would agree that I'm glad we read it. It was definitely a tough read, um, as far as content, but I'm glad we read it, and I did appreciate the author's writing. I really did. It was descriptive and well done.
Yeah, I would be more than open to reading another book of hers in the future. I saw she has at least one other one,
Oh, okay.
but I think the story, having a child protagonist, all of that just wasn't my cup of tea. I could like she's obviously a skilled writer, but
Yes.
just not necessarily for me.
Yeah. And this was her debut novel, which is interesting too, because this was a very well received book. She gained a lot of acclaim for it. And I think I read that she secured like a record book deal actually for this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that's kind of what catapulted her into fame as an author. Which I feel that's pretty crazy. It's kind of interesting, and I would love to know more kind of about the process of does someone how does that happen to someone?
Mhm.
You know?
I also feel like you have to know someone.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll read another book of Emma's. Maybe not. He's kidding. Yeah, the wind blows us. Yeah. But overall, I think it was a good read, and we don't regret reading it. And if you want to read a book about with along the lines of the Manson family, if you're into that, then maybe this is for you.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
If you are interested in hearing if Desiree does end up in a cult season 5, stick around, follow us. We
Um, and also, by the way, we do rate our books on Storygraph. That's our app of choice for logging our reads.
yeah.
We really like it. Um, and
And our usernames are just our names.
Yep.
Desiree Reed, Morgan Cline. Follow us.
yeah,
Or friend us. I guess I don't know. She's my only friend on Storygraph.
say
I haven't very social there, but I'd like to be. So if you're on Storygraph, add us. And I don't know if we have to add you back. I will. We-
yeah. And I think we can also maybe down the line, you can create book clubs on Storygraph. So maybe if anyone's interested in that, we could kind of look into how that logistically would work.
Mhm. Perfect.
Okay. Thank you. See you next episode.
We will be back soon. If anyone has any recommendations for things we should read in the future, please let us know. And chat soon.
See you.